Angelic Gibson. Welcome to BetterTech.
Hello, Jocelyn. It's great to be with you today. Thanks for having me on your show.
We're so excited to have you. You are the CIO of AvidXchange, right?
That is correct.
Tell us
Yes.
a little bit about what your role is and how you came to that role.
Yeah. So I've had the privilege of serving here at AvidXchange for a little over 5 years. And in my purview of accountability, I have all technology delivery for internal teammate, productivity, meaning all the technology that our teammates use to do their daily roles here at AvidXchange I'm accountable for, as well as all the products that we build and we take to market. Because AvidXchange is a software as a service based company, we automate the business processes of accounts payable automation. And therefore, everything that we do for our customers is technology driven, given the fact that we're a software company.
That's amazing. What we're focused on today is like how to marry operational efficiency and growth. And it's interesting, your role is unusual. It spans that internal productivity and enablement all the way through your outbound product development. That's unusual, right?
It is typically you're either focused more on IT delivery, traditional CIO, and then CTO focuses on R&D capability. But I've had the unique opportunity throughout my career to be on both sides of the business. I grew up building enterprise class technology for supply chain. So think companies like Estee Lauder, American Tire, big manufacturing, distribution, retail type companies. They need a lot of technology to run their operations, as well as building software as service platforms servicing, Fortune 50 companies. So I had the opportunity of leading all technology for a company called Techniques here in Charlotte, North Carolina, where we built SaaS-based platforms for agriculture and pharmaceuticals. So my career over the last almost 30 years has been a combination of really being on both sides of the fence, really enabling teammates to do their role through technology, and then also building products that create value for organizations.
Yeah, I want to come back to that because I think that's a big part of this marriage between operational efficiency and growth, especially in the cloud era. There's
Yes.
more blurring of those lines. But before we get there, let's talk a little bit more about AvidXchange. This is an area of interest for me. In the sort of fintech space, accounts payable. I know some listeners might be thinking, am I going to like hearing about accounts payable? But it's actually kind of a fascinating problem.
Yeah, we like to call, we make the office of the CFO sexy. That's what I like to say.
That's great.
But if you think about the manual processes that run across many businesses across the world, the majority of people are still paying through paper check. And if you think about just how long it takes to process data, to create a check, to get that check in the mail, get it delivered out to a supplier who needs payment, and then getting it checked, like it's a long process that's also high risk for fraud in today's world. It's easy to intercept checks and unfortunately steal money through that process. So what we do is we take the whole process from procure, like you create a purchase order, to I'm a buyer and I'm going to go out and I'm going to buy something from a supplier. I create the purchase order and then the supplier invoices me. We automate that. We ingest that into our platform. And then we, go through the approval process to then make a payment. We automate that entire life cycle. So from procure to pay, it runs, electronically through our platform. So it's increasing speed, quality, reducing risk on fraud, lots of benefits. And then we have a tremendous amount of value added services in the ecosystem of our platform offering, where for suppliers, as an example, we service first and foremost over 8,800 buyers on our platform, who then are making payments to over 900,000 plus suppliers. So that's a very big network of businesses that run through our platform. So then we have a tremendous opportunity to create value on both sides, not just for the buyer, but for the supplier. And so when we think about the supplier side of the house, how can we help speed up cash flow for a supplier? I mean, especially in the macro environment we're in, cash is king. So how do you have cash flow to run your business? So we have a product called Invoice Accelerator that we can advance payment in advance of payment terms. We can advance ahead of that. So there's many different use cases that create value both to the buyer and supplier on our ecosystem. But that kind of gives you an idea about why we get excited about the automation of accounts payable.
Yeah, I love that whole explanation there. It's really helpful to understand that perspective of suppliers as well. It sounds like you've got some complicated finance going on there, but the ability for them to book the sales faster is like lifeblood for so many young organizations and smaller organizations as well. And just from personal experience, I will say, once you cut that PO, as a buyer within the corporate world, then it's like the map that has the dragons on the side, then you just don't know how to get go. What happens after that is a mystery, even at very evolved companies.
Oh, yeah. And if you think about too, just the advances in technology, when you make a purchase order and you receive an invoice, doing that match, like how do you know that you're actually processing an invoice that has the correct invoice details on it? Is it actually aligned and matched to what you actually procured to begin with? So with the advances of artificial intelligence, we have very robust capability on the front end that when we're receiving invoices into our system, we have AI capability that can do zero touch on index processing on an invoice. So if you think about it, the traditional way of even processing invoices would be I open up the envelope, I'm reading the invoice and I'm keying it into some system. There's an indexer to understand what are the invoice details, what am I getting billed for? We can ingest that automatically, whether it be scanning into our system, sending it electronically into an inbox of sorts, where we can just read that document, pull off all the critical to pay data that we need to pay, and the quality and the consistencies there, because as artificial intelligence learns how to process its documents, it gets smarter and smarter and smarter. So if you think about the volume of invoices that we have the opportunity to ingest and process into our platform, our AI model is getting smarter every single day.
That's amazing.
Pretty powerful stuff.
I said, I have a data background, and it's actually surprising how many, companies don't really even have a good list of suppliers because the invoices have been entered in a million different ways, and there's a lot of like vagary. So I love hearing about all of this. So, what I'm hearing is you've got some complicated secondary market work going on, right? To forward payment, you've got like all the payment networks. You've got to keep everybody, this huge network of people. So you have some really cutting edge, forward leading technologies that are all centered on growth. I'm sure that's a main focus of yours. But you're also talking about operational efficiency, right, as one of the key inputs. I guess I'm just curious. We all feel like we know what operational efficiency means. However, how do you define it and think about it?
Yeah, I think it's a big question, right? There's a lot to it, but I think the simplification of the answer for me would be, am I optimized in how I'm doing business process execution? So we have business processes that span every role inside of an organization. And the question is there friction? Is there slowness? Is there manual work that happens on the continuum of that end-to-end business process? And how do we leverage technology to increase automation, which reduces friction, increases speed? And so if you kind of think macro, you're increasing speed, reducing cost, reducing risk, and increasing quality. And so that is the macro of operational efficiency. It's really about speed, cost control, and its scale, right? And so how do I continue to execute the processes across the business while we're growing, but costs to do the process are going down? So if you think about, people talk about unit cost metrics. What is it? What's the unit cost in our world? What's the unit cost to process an invoice? What's the unit cost to process a payment? We're constantly looking at those things to understand what additional automation or emerging technologies can help us increase our productivity and throughput on those processes.
And this is looking inward at your own organization or looking outward to the customers and
both.
Okay.
Because we're running business processes. I mean, we're running the heart of an accounts payable process for our customers. And so our process intersects with their business processes. So the more, efficiencies we have on how we execute a business flow, our customers inherit that efficiency. And so that's part of the value creation for the customer is we increase the operational efficiencies of the buyers and the suppliers that we're working with.
How do you start to think about measure, like how do you measure it or create a baseline, right? To figure out how to, I imagine you want to see like, how are things working today? And then where can I get this operational efficiency? From my perspective, I don't even know how you would get a baseline on some of these things. How's that worked?
Yeah, so the way that I kind of think about it is first of all, do you understand? The question is, do you understand what are your critical business processes? And is it documented? And it's literally, do you have the basics in place? And then do you understand the timing? If you have 10 steps in a business process, how long does each step take? And can you increase speed and efficiencies through that continuum? And so if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And that starts with, first, you got to have something well defined. So then you can start to manage to measure. And then once you have the measurements in place, it's continuing to create, it could be process redesign that then informs the automation that you're leveraging with technology, but it all gets down to the speed and the quality of each step in a process. Can you go faster? Or the question is, how can you go faster while protecting quality?
You know, it's so interesting. And I love what you're saying, right? Is to deeply understand what the business processes are and what the key levers are. And I want to double click on that though, because my experience has been trying to do automation within organizations, not at the level you are, but just as an individual contributor, is that people who think they know the process sometimes don't, or it's documented, but the actual way people do it is very different. If you were advising your younger self or another person taking over a role like this, coming in cold, like what do you really do to start understanding that?
It's such a great question. And the number one question I always start in any transformation I'm starting to lead or new technology that we're going to be building. It could be a new capability, a new product that we're going to build. Is first of all, what is the problem statement? So what are we trying to do for the business? And then what is the process to support the solution, right? And then show me your business process. People cannot point you to a document that shows you the end-to-end process, which if you don't have that, you can't architect, you can't pinpoint problems. Like it literally all boils down to do the teams that are actually building technology, are they intimately connected to the processes they're supporting and why things are done the way they're done? And sometimes the way we're even doing a business process has outlived itself and it needs the next generation. And so it's super critical when we talk about being agile. It's not just about the technology. It's, are the business processes scaling with the business? And what worked a year ago very well may not work well today because that's how fast things are changing. And so continually evaluating, again, do you understand your business process? If it's not documented with key metrics, it's not going to be well managed. That is the first smoke signal, meaning that your teams have no business designing or trying to define a product that's going to solve a problem if they can't point to the root of the business process. And that's where I start. So if there's an absence of understanding or documentation, then I'm going to be looking for evidence to say, how do I know that you know what the end-to-end business processes are and that we're going to build solutions that solve problems? And that's the first question I always ask. And
You know, that's cool. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, and just like you said, oftentimes we get really enthusiastic about technology, whether it's new technology or some product we want to go build and think it's going to solve the problems for our customers. We start building without actually understanding a problem, or B, the process that's going to actually solve the problem.
I love what you're saying. I think some of the best leaders I've worked with in tech, you know, over time have the guts to ask about the problem statement. Sometimes it feels like you're just so far down the road that everybody knows what the problem statement is, but it is so useful, I think, to reconnect with that frequently. And then the other thing I love that you're saying, or let me say it back to you so I understand, is I think you're saying I ask people to tell me and then show me. So you're sort of like declared and observed.
Yeah, it's, inspect what you expect, right? And so if you're not inspecting as a leader, it's not about, being big brother and micromanaging. That's not what it's about. But if you have clear expectations, then you should be able to inspect to make sure that those expectations are being met. And if you're not, then, you know, you're going to be surprised. I mean, that's just what you're going to build something, you're going to get something into production, and you're going to be surprised that the business problem is not actually going to be solved, or the value that you wanted to create for the customer is slightly missing the mark, or, you know, you're going to go back to engineering for 6 more months to actually get to the source of what you need to do for the customer.
I want to talk about some more specific examples if you can share some. But before that, just this process is really interesting of really understanding what's happening so you can find operational efficiency. So we've got a picture of what happens when you start as a leader, you're starting a transformation project, you're digging in. What kind of processes have you put in place to kind of continuously identify operational efficiency or claw back a problem that's going the wrong direction?
Yeah, so I can give you multiple examples, but I'm going to start with software engineering. Is that a good place to go? You
It's
interested
my
in?
favorite thing, so I'm always going to say yes to that.
Okay, so software engineering. So here at AvidXchange, we have several teams, you know, 40 plus teams across our engineering ecosystem. And each team is working on a set of unique opportunities. And what do I mean by that? It's true that you can have maybe 3 teams that are rolling up to one product as an example, but they're working on different parts of the product, right? So a team is working on a unique problem or opportunity that is directly connected to that product. And we know that the more products you have in your portfolio offering, whether it be because you inherited something through acquisition, so you acquired it, or you just built a net new product and it stands alone, whatever the reasons are, you have a portfolio of products and technology. And all those products are more than likely at a different state of the life cycle, like the evolution of the product life, right? Maybe some products are nearing technology end of life. So they need a next generation architecture, they need some transformation, evolution, just to keep scaling with the scale of a company, right? Maybe, you know, a new technology is greenfield. It's all cloud native. It's beautiful, things that we wake up dreaming about. But we typically have a mix set of technologies that span our product portfolio, and you have different challenges across that ecosystem. And so what we do is, not to get too into the weeds, but there's 24 sets of key capabilities. It's based off of the DevOps State of the Union DORA metrics, but there's 24 key capabilities when you're thinking about building robust technology. And based on where technology lives in the life cycle, the set of capabilities is going to tell you where your friction points are going to be. So it could be that you're working in a technology that might be 20 years old. I mean, AvidXchange has been around for 20 years. And so there's parts of our platform that are resilient. They've been running the test of time, and we're transforming parts of it to be more cloud native, modern, et cetera, so it continues to scale for our customers. Those challenges are going to be very, very unique. You know, test automation wasn't really a thing 20 years ago. And so how do we think about increasing test automation to have more test coverage to protect our quality? Because what will happen is, let's say we build the code and then it hits testing, and then all of a sudden there's a 2-week lag to go through manual testing before we get to production. So that will tell us, because we're measuring every bit of the life cycle from ideation to product definition through software engineering, testing, all the way out to production. We're measuring each step in the life cycle of software engineering, and we can see where our biggest lag is. So if it's testing, as an example, 2-week lag there to get to production, we're going to keep doubling down and increasing test automation to start to reduce that cycle time. So we have cycle times in every step of our process, and we know what are some of the critical challenges that we need to go solve to increase cycle time so we can go faster. And then what we do, so across all of the teams in our engineering organization, we baseline them. We actually have bands of how productive is each team, and what are the unique constraints to that team. And then we have operational efficiency plans that we set every year to say these are the big rocks these teams are going to solve in their unique space to actually increase operational efficiency so we can go further faster together.
Have you kind of wound all this into a regular agile kind of process, like into your PI planning, or is it a separate process on top?
Nope, it's interwoven into the way that the teams work. So as they're touching, various parts of code bases as an example, they're continually to say, how can I think about security first design up front as I'm going into this part of the platform? How can I think about, we do site reliability engineering. So how do I think about my observability and my automation when it hits production? Everything we talk about shifting left, that's in the design phase now. And so as we're going through the process, we're adding automation each cycle time. And so the team has annual productivity improvement goals that they, sign up for. And we might stretch a little bit, say, we're going to push you a little bit further. But then, of course, we take that and we break it down into quarterly goals. And then that gets into their sprint planning. How are they actually going to be successful quarter over quarter? Does that help?
Okay, so I imagine everybody just joyfully adopts all of these ideas.
You know what? Honestly, so when we
How's-
first, it's
yeah.
funny to say that. When we first introduced it, I would say definitely there's some pushback, right? Because you're moving people's cheese, you're making them think about things a little bit different. And change is always hard for people. It's just human nature. We all have an initial reaction to change. Although I will say this, the teams are fully on board with it now. Because what we're doing is we're creating space and investment for them to get their own friction out of their way so they can work on more innovative things. If you're constantly in the business of waiting on someone else to do some manual thing like testing, you're not working on things that are creating value for the business. And so they're incented to work on high value items and increase automation. It really goes into teammate connectivity. When we talk about operational efficiencies, it's not just about increasing the bottom line, making the business more effective. It actually increases teammate engagement, teammate morale, because they're working in a healthier environment.
This is such a good point, and I really, for our listeners, want to underscore how important this is, especially like tech's my background for software engineers and developers, and everybody's on these teams. Nobody wants to just be on the end of life, maintenance projects or typically there's a sort of a bifurcation of people who work on the cool stuff and then people who, are in the business as usual camp. And what you're saying is these operational efficiencies, the more they're automated, the more everybody can kind of get a piece of the relevancy, relevant project or the growth project. That's interesting. And I just think it's so relevant for so many people working on teams who feel like maybe a little less connected to the overall goal because they are focused on a lot of friction. What's that called? Toil.
That's right. Toil. Reduce the toil in the system.
Yeah.
And I think that also goes into like, what is the tech strategy for an organization? I mean, there's several different ways of building technology, of course, but I have really just over time ascribed to platform thinking where, and people talk about it and people get excited about it, but there's beyond, the ability to create scale through platforms, you're able just to change the whole dynamic of a teammate experience. Because to your point, I have definitely experienced throughout my career where people get maybe put in a box around business as usual maintenance. But when you start to think platform thinking, the platform is going to be servicing even end of life products. So end of life actually gets connected into a next gen platform, which then now the teammate, instead of keeping this monolithic old system alive, the monolithic is now stitched into a platform that's kind of running the back end for them. And they can actually start focusing in on how do I create more value on the platform. And so I think, technology strategy needs to really inform what is your operating model long term, even for the teammate experience of engineers as an example.
I just feel like everyone loves a big idea. I know we all want to make salaries and like, work's not everything, but I think everyone likes to be part of a big idea. And the platform is that big idea that everything you're doing is supporting this overall effort. So, we're touching a little bit on the growth side of the equation, which I definitely want to get into a little bit more. And one of the questions I have for you is how has this operational efficiency point of view impacted or has it impacted your cloud strategy? Because it's such an interesting component of operational efficiency now is kind of up in the cloud.
Oh yeah, it's such a good question. So first of all, any company can grow, but what's the cost of growth? And so if you're not thinking about both in parallel, it's kind of like you're eating, what is it? You're eating all your own profits, if you will, like, right? That's what's happening. And so it's imperative that if we are thinking about operational efficiency, the byproduct is you're creating leverage to actually grow and grow further. And if a company's not growing, then everyone in the organization is going to lose. And I mean, these are just the basics of, obviously it's the universal law of business, right? You need a healthy business and a healthy.
And it sounds like the basics, but I have to say it is interesting that everyone just gets very focused on what's in front of them. And it is worth reiterating, right? It's not just about continuously turning the wheel of, getting those databases instantiated and, doing your QA checks, but, there's actually like this bigger problem that we're all trying to solve. I think it is worth noting.
Right. No, it is. And because, it goes into this mindset, oh, it's all, sometimes, oh, leaders care about the numbers. That's all they care about. And it's like, well, it's not just it's not about the numbers per se. Yes, we're looking at numbers, but why are we looking at the numbers? Because if we're not growing and we're not a healthy scaling business, we're not going to have job creation. The people who are in their roles won't have their roles. It all works hand in hand together. And so really getting people connected to why is growth important? And also we need to scale. If we're not scaling, then honestly, you're really not growing at the pace in which you can grow.
Oh, interesting. Can you say more about that? How are those related?
Yeah. So if you think about speed of innovation, right? If I'm so busy trying to keep the business running and it's, it's just a struggle every day and it's not efficient, you're dealing with manual processes and it's highly inefficient, you're going to spend so much more investment keeping the lights on as opposed to taking the leverage that you create through automation and reinvesting it into the business so you can grow, scale faster. And so when you think about what we do, we're a software company. If we're not innovating fast, then I think that's one of the biggest competitive things that we have to contend to every day is our pace of innovation, because we are a market leader in the mid-market segment in our space. And our speed of innovation is going to keep setting us apart. And so we have to do things efficiently so we can keep our speed for new value creation to our customer and our growth keep moving forward.
I want to have tons of questions after that. I think that's such an interesting couple of statements there, but I'll start with one, which is, we're talking a little bit about growth. You've set up this picture for us of a very efficient organization. Everything velocity is wrapped into your agile process. Where do new ideas come? Where's the growth coming from and the new ideas coming from? How are you making space for that?
Yeah. So, well, we have an incredible team that keeps a pulse on the market, of course. So we're constantly looking at the market. What are the emerging trends? What are the things that we need to be thinking about tomorrow that we're really not thinking about today? And honestly, we listen very closely to our customer. I mean, if you don't understand the heart of your customer, then how would you be able to service them? So we spend a tremendous amount of time listening to a broad range of different customer experiences on our platforms. As I said, when you have over 8,000 buyers and over 900,000 suppliers on a platform, you have a lot of diversification of experience on that platform. And so it's important for us to cast a wide net, listen very carefully. That with market trends is going to inform where we need to continue to increase the customer experience in a positive note on current platform offerings, add additional features, capabilities, but then also what are the next big rock investments that we need to be making? In large in part, that's why we invested in our new platform offering, Invoice Accelerator. There's a great need from the voice of our supplier customers that need a capability like that, and that really helped inform how we thought about that product and what we took to market. And we're continuing to do that as we expand our portfolio offering.
Invoice Accelerator, that's actually a great example. Can we just kind of walk, maybe we could use that as an example of, more specifically of like, what were you hearing from suppliers, and did you use the sort of operationally efficient method to create a new offering?
Yeah, so if you think about, so first of all, the great thing about Invoice Accelerator is that is a brand new net capability. Okay, so I'm going to get a little technical here just for a
That's a
minute.
big, I mean, that's actually such a great call out because that's a heavy lift for a lot of companies.
It is, and it's so if you think about some of our platforms, so back it up, we are in the cloud. Okay, so we partner, we have multiple cloud partners, but we are in the cloud. And some of those are not, all of our capabilities are not cloud native. So that means, you know what this means, but it means we have virtual servers out there where we're running, instances of our platform out there. We want to, we're eventually moving all of this to be cloud native, right? But when we think about net new capabilities, we want to build cloud native first. That would be the goal because you can have economies of scale incredibly well with cloud native solutions. So Invoice Accelerator is a key example where it's a greenfield opportunity, net new capability, although we were able to build it and take it to market pretty quickly because of that platform architecture that I talked about. And so we have platform capabilities that new product capabilities can take advantage of, which helps us get to market faster.
So it's more modular.
So it's more, it's domain centric, rinse, lather, repeat. So for example, just to keep it simple, you could have a security platform capability and you can reuse that across all your products.
Like a shared service.
We have business shared services in our platform that now we can start to create value on top of. And so with that, we use the economies of scale through the platform, tremendous operational efficiencies to do net new innovation to create value for the customer. So why did we build it? Because the suppliers were telling us that they would have great value in expediting cash into their hand. And so you can imagine that sometimes they have terms of net 30 plus where they're not going to receive a payment till after 30 days of providing a service. Well, if I can provide a service today and receive payment today, how amazing would that be? It's an incredible opportunity when you're talking about, mid-market, even small business suppliers that are on our network, when you can advance, payment to them in advance their net terms, it's a huge value add for them. So we listened and we worked with a lot of our suppliers on the network to inform how we think about, building that capability and putting it into their hands.
So that is what I'm hearing you, just to make sure I'm understanding, is this sort of a platform approach to the architecture is fundamentally supporting both the operational efficiency and the growth opportunity. So you're kind of putting that structure in.
That's correct. So I call it the power of the platform. You have the scale, so operational efficiencies of the platform, and then it just is the jet fuel that can help us grow new capabilities straight out to the marketplace.
It's so easy to say yes to all of this. It sounds amazing, but I'm thinking about when you start out, how do you have to manage up to get everybody bought in, probably in your management, right, to these really big ideas. These are big investments. It's almost like a philosophical underpinning of the whole company. How, like, to your peers out there, what would you say, like, lessons learned in making sure you have support from your CEO on these approaches?
Again, it starts with data. You never approach a conversation with feeling, especially like when you talk about technology. There's a lot of different ways. I want to say skin the cat, but I hate that phrase because it's so negative. You understand what I'm saying?
A lot of ways to get there. There's a lot of different ways to get there.
There's a lot of different ways to create various architectures. But when we're talking about, big ideas of, AvidXchange, we have many products in our portfolio. It's more of a monolithic architecture. This is, years ago, a couple years ago. But moving more to platform thinking architecture, it's data. How fast can we make changes to production? How long are customers waiting for new features? And if we
Mhm.
put something into their hands, is it a positive experience? Or are we interrupting the business flow? So is change hard to make? And so when you start to have data that would inform, you need to start to figure out how to create value faster with higher quality. There's only so many answers to that problem. And so bringing the data to the conversation to say, this is the reality where we're at, this is where we could be, and bring in benchmark data to show
Mhm.
where we could be,
Mhm.
it's really the starting point in a conversation.
I love what you're saying too, because you're kind of making sure you hook it into the truly big idea, right? Not just kind of like there's a lot of concerns in the executive team, right? There's lots of things to worry about, but just into the big, like a Capital One, we're changing banking for good. It's really important to like come back to those big ideas sometimes, I think, when you're working with your leadership.
Yeah, it's really about what's your North Star and how are you going to get
Right.
there? The different ideas, the solutions that we bring to the table to get there, it has to be grounded. First, like how is this supporting the North Star? And then
Yeah.
what's the data telling you? A lot of people will not have, and I have done this historically in my career, not had a full data set to support the why behind what I want to do. And
Mm-hmm.
it prolongs getting to the right yes, so you can start moving forward. And so
Mm-hmm.
over time, I've learned, really understanding through data, why is this so important and what's going to be the value back to the business.
Right.
That's super important for, leaders to articulate.
Even though it may be painful, I think what you're saying is it may be painful to get all that data together, but it's worth it in the long run.
It is. And I would say specifically here at AvidXchange, I've been very fortunate. I have an incredible set of peers that it wasn't a hard sell. They're, data-driven executives, like myself. And you kind of look at the data and the data tells a story. And then it's how do you rally to really come around this idea and we're in it together. And that's our culture here at AvidXchange. And so I think it's also important to be on a team where you're truly in it together. It can't be, a half commitment because a half commitment's not going to lead to success.
That's real. I think that's a really good call out, right? And it's systemic. It's systemic. To have that team is gonna like be the springboard for all this operational efficiency and growth. I think that's a good thing to call out. I don't know if you're aware of this, Angelique, but it's actually no longer allowed to have a tech interview without talking about generative AI.
Oh gosh, really?
No, I'm just I feel like every single, interview I do now, every discussion, right, is pretty dominated here. And I guess without revealing any of your secrets, what are your thoughts about, as a technology leader? Like, what's your checklist of things to think about when you're adopting AI?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm in the camp where you better just dive into the deep end and figure it out because it's here to stay. And those who aren't diving into the deep end, most likely are probably going to be left behind. And so the question is, how do you dive into the deep end while also having guardrails and protection for the business? Because there's still a lot we don't know, right? And so how are we what we kind of think about is knowledge through groupthink, and so having councils in place to really evaluate what are the AI capabilities that are coming out, how would they create value or increase productivity across the business, and then just from a security compliance perspective, privacy perspective, are we ready for it, yes or no, or what would need to be true for us to embrace it. And
Hmm.
just having those guardrails has helped us quicken decision making on what we can move forward with out of the gate and start to see productivity improvements on. Or maybe we need to just hold back for a little bit and see what's going on with this capability that's in the market.
You mentioned like invoice processing, document processing is one area. Are there certain like use cases that are uh,
I think
showing up a little bit better in this analysis?
Well, I think specifically with generative AI, I think every single role in any company out there has an opportunity to increase productivity. Whether it's you're creating a job description or you're creating an RFP that needs to be put out there, it doesn't matter. Any sort of content generation in a role, and every role has content generation, there's an opportunity to increase efficiency. And so the question becomes, what starts to cross the line where maybe you're putting private data in a public, ML model that then could be used later? These are the
Mhm.
questions we don't really understand quite yet. So we need to be very be very slow, I would say, to, obviously we're not going to be putting company information out in public models. But we're fully embracing how do we build our own internal models, so we can leverage the data that we have. One example is knowledge bases. How do we build an AvidXchange knowledge base on all the different things that we have in our ecosystem that then could help self-service out to our customers? It helps them
Mhm.
don't have to pick up the phone and call us, but they can self-service fast with meaningful, results, not just from a search engine. But there's use cases in every single role. I mean, we're all familiar with, the Microsoft land of Copilot, how Copilot can now run alongside engineers. And, people are quoting north of 30% plus productivity improvements. We're obviously looking at tools like that to say, how can we increase productivity in engineering, testing, all the various roles. But honestly, it bleeds across customer care, marketing, sales. It doesn't matter where you're at in the organization. Generative AI can help you in a very meaningful way. And so it's the guardrails to keep the teammate safe and the company safe as this technology is emerging and exploding across the globe, honestly.
Yeah, it's something to watch. It's been a long time since I've seen something.
Like the internet,
It
right?
does remind me of when we really got to yeah, really
Yeah.
started having commercialization of the internet.
Yep.
And it's a good example of the balance between operational efficiency and growth, right? It's this particular example there. Is there anything else that you wanted to make sure to share with our audience on this balancing act?
Well, I think it's also important. We just had our leadership kickoff a couple weeks ago just to get the year going, and I do this special summit for all the technology folks. And what I did not anticipate to be an outcome when it came to AI specifically is the true anxiety or emotional fear that people are having with AI, as far as, is it going to replace an engineer? Is it going to replace test automation? Whoever, like, and the answer is no. Just like this has been a common fear through all, emerging and, transformative technologies that come to play. But one thing that really just stood out to me, we had two guest speakers that actually came, and they both said something very similar, is you can't replace the human component. A computer will never take on emotions, right? And so who we are as people, what we leave in our products, what we leave in our work cannot be taken, it cannot be replaced or taken away from us through technology. And so if we really think about how we're using our critical thinking, who we are as people, and leaving that impression on the work that we do, that is the highest value that any human can contribute. And, the technology is not going to take that away. But I had many robust conversations with teammates, certainly across AvidXchange and into the community just of late, where we're starting to think about, well, what does that actually look like? What does it mean to have your most critical thinking left into your products? And I think these are the questions that we really have to start asking ourselves, not to be fearful of the technology, but let the technology help us. And then what does that mean? How do we think about our own personal growth? What new skills are we going to need to continue to grow and learn and to adapt to the world changing around us? That's where our focus needs to be, along with the benefits that a technology like generative AI can bring.
I really like that perspective. One of my favorite bosses once said to me, if it's happening already, I'm for it. It's happening, right? We
It
can't
is. It's so well said.
got to get behind it. It's been a pleasure talking to you on your business and technology perspectives. Just a couple quick wrap up questions that are a little bit more about your career and yourself. Let's say there are some VPs, SVPs in delivery or tech roles, and they're thinking like, what skills do I need to level up into the CIO role? Is there any particular skill or something that you feel like really helped you jump up into that role?
I think for me, there's the basics of, do you have the domain expertise to lead what you're being asked to lead? So for me, obviously being in a CIO, CTO type role, it's, do I have the technical skill to lead the function that I'm being asked to lead? And then have I taken time to learn the business that I'm working inside of? Those are table stakes. So if you don't have those two things, keep sharpening the axe on that. But then I think what really sets people apart, this has been my personal experience, and even when I observe my own leaders, and as I watch my leaders progress in any organization that I've led, the one thing that can hold people back, slow people down in their career progress, is their communication skills.
Mm.
And, it's, I personally think it's not talked about enough, but what does it mean to truly communicate? It means that it's not just about delivering information to the people who are listening to you. It's about inspiring them, captivating them, getting them to care about your problem. And when you're in technology, half the time, a lot of people don't understand what you're talking about. And so how are you meeting your audience, the person who's listening to you, where they're at, so they can actually get excited and inspired about what you're saying? And then you leave them with the confidence you're going to get something done. Like, you're going to do something pretty powerful, and they can actually go home and rest and sleep at night because you're going to solve that problem for them. And so building that confidence, it's all through not just say-do ratio, but how you're communicating up front is going to be absolutely critical.
Hmm.
So
I think that's great.
practicing that skill and really getting feedback, real-time feedback. Feedback is a gift. How did I communicate? Was I effective? How do you know you're being effective? Like, do they have confidence? What's missing? Those are the critical questions that people have to keep leaning into to make sure that their communication skills are growing with them as they're growing their career.
I think that's such a great shout out. I don't think enough people talk about it. And I like your perspective that it's a skill. It can be attained.
It
You
can
don't
be.
have to be a natural communicator. It can be attained. That sounds good. That sounds good. Well, thank you so much. It was absolutely a pleasure chatting with you today. And we really appreciate all your insights.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure being with you today. Thank you.